we only use a handful of subs. We use the same ones religiously. I don't play the game of shopping around and, trying to find a cheaper price or, most of my subs are fair to me and I try to be fair to them.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Charlie Stewart, a contractor in Altamont, New York. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Charlie, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So one of our listeners suggested that I talk to you when I put out the call for what I described as an old house whisperer. Do you think that's an accurate description of you? Yeah.
We do a lot of work on old homes.
Can you talk about your business, please?
Yeah, so we're a small business. It's a family business. It's mainly me and my brother. We do use subcontractors for certain jobs, and we bring in some extra help when we need it. But we try to keep it small so that the detail stays with us.
So when you say small, do you mean a small team or smaller projects? Do you have a special niche that you target?
We do large projects and small. One of our small niches is we do some steeple restoration work when it comes our way. If we can find something in the area. We've done 2 steeple restorations in Altamont. We've done a couple on the hill towns, and we're currently looking at one that's about 40 minutes away. But for the most part, we try to stay close or in Altamont, and that's where we're well known.
I want to ask you more about the steeples because I think the people listening to the show are fascinated by that. But can you talk a little bit about Altamont? Because I think that kind of sets the stage for your work, right? Yeah.
So it's a small town. It's a suburb of, like Guilderland and Albany, New York. It's, no stoplight town. It's a really pretty tight community. A lot of good families there, a lot of longtime families there. Our family's been there since 1914 when my great grandfather bought, our family farm, which is just outside the village lines. So we grew up, I've grown up there. My dad grew up there, and we love it there.
Have you come from a family, a lineage of builders or handy people?
Definitely handy people. My great grandfather was very into farming and carpentry work, especially on our farmhouse and property and old barns that we have. And as it passed down, my grandfather was more of a mechanic. Did a lot of machine work and things like that. And my dad followed more in his footsteps. My grandfather on the opposite side of the family is still alive, and he is, was very into carpentry work and a lot of remodeling and things like that. And so between that and my dad, that's kind of where it came from for me.
When you have family get-togethers, do you all talk about your respective handy endeavors?
Yeah, we definitely, I definitely get asked the questions of what are you working on now? What project are you doing? So, definitely.
I'm guessing, like a lot of places, you've had your fair share of newcomers, like a lot of rural places since the pandemic. Is that true?
Yeah, we've had a lot of people move from New York City upstate. It's definitely, it's affected our real estate market. It hasn't really affected my business that much yet. I haven't worked for too many people that are, from out of town recently. A lot of my clients are repeat and all referral.
I want to talk more about your clients too, because when you live in a small town, you take the work that comes to you, right? When I was looking at your Facebook page, I loved looking at your projects because it shows a wide variety of stuff you work on. And you mentioned the steeple jack work. Maybe that's a good time. Now's a good time to talk about that.
Sure.
How did you get into that? And are you up there climbing around yourself?
Oh yeah. Well, we kind of fell into that. Back in 2008 was the first one that we did. And we were working on a Victorian in the village of Altamont, and we had a 60-foot boom lift that we had leased. And my dad's church asked me if I would bring the lift over there because they had some siding blowing off the steeple and wanted to know if we could just tack it up. So I said, sure. So we went over there, and the reason the siding was blowing off was because most of the supporting timbers were completely rotted. So,
I could have guessed that, yeah.
Yeah.
There was nothing to hold the siding.
No. And the pastor came out, and I showed him, and he wouldn't go up in the lift with me, but from the ground, I said, I'll go up and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And I went up to the top of the spire, and I grabbed onto the very tip of it, and I could shake it. And I think I just about gave him a heart attack. So, but I wanted him to know how severe it was. It was in danger of blowing over.
Sure.
And once the town got involved, they basically temporarily condemned the building until we took the steeple down, and that upset a lot of people. And that was on a Monday that the town got involved, and we the building department said, as soon as you get that steeple off, you can have church again on Sunday. So we took the steeple down on Saturday morning the same week so that the church never missed a week of church.
How long did it take you to rebuild the steeple? And I'm guessing you did most of the work on the ground.
Yeah, we did. We built the whole thing just about on the ground in sections, and then put it back up like that. I think we spent about 3.5, almost 4 months there, rebuilding everything.
Did that keep you up at night thinking about how to get that done?
Well, it's funny because my dad was in the basket with me. My dad used to work for me for a while before he finally retired. But he was in the basket that day that we went there to check things, and he says, "You sure you want to get into this?" And I said, "Well," I said, "It's not really any different than working on a house, other than you're 70 or 80 feet in the air, and heights don't bother me at all." So, and I told him, I said, we know enough people that are true craftsmen besides us that know the trade that will help us if we need it. So I felt pretty confident, and I said to him, hopefully in a year from now, we'll be looking back at this project and say, well, we did that and it's done. So that's how that went.
That's really cool. And obviously, like, once you do one, people come to you for similar work. Yep.
We don't get a lot of it because I'm not willing to travel. I have, four kids and I'm married. So I don't want to be gone. So we probably lose out on some pretty cool projects, but we love doing the ones that are local. So.
Was that a timber frame then that you rebuilt or made a new frame for that steeple?
So the new framing was not timber framed. It was a stick build type of setup, more of a modern framing. Mm-hmm. And that was done mainly to save money. Timber framing is expensive and time.
And no one goes up there. I think you'd agree, right? Like, yeah,
exactly. And from the exterior, you cannot tell,
You can't tell. Yeah.
So,
what else kind of weird stuff do you get involved in your business? You told me today you were up siding, I think you said the side of a gable dormer.
Yep. Yeah, we get into all kinds of stuff. Anything from steeples to, we even do boilers and electrical work. My brother is a huge part of this, and he's more like my dad. He's more the mechanical, plumbing, electrical side of it. So we kind of round each other out quite well.
And is it hard to get along all the time, or do you guys have a pretty good working relationship?
No, we definitely get along pretty good. Like anybody, every once in a while, we don't see eye to eye on something, but, we usually handle it well. And one of us usually, talks the other one into whatever they're thinking. So,
Whoever's got the better case, I'm guessing.
yeah. Yeah.
Do you like having a wide variety of stuff to work on? Is that part of your nature that you'd rather have a mix than, specialize in one kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd get bored with it if we didn't have a different challenge, That's what we like. Both my brother and I both like a challenge. So I really like to do projects that other people don't want to do or, are intimidated by, like steeples. I live for doing steeples. I mean, I would, my brother doesn't like the heights as much as I do, but a quick funny story is 2 years ago we did the second steeple that we've done in Altamont, and wasn't a full restoration, but it was a lot of repair work, and we had a 120-foot lift rented, and that lift broke, and they brought us a 180-foot lift, and nobody. When we got done with the job, I said, I want to go all the way to the top so I can take pictures of the village and just see what's out there. And nobody would go in that lift with me all the way to the top. So
that's got to be a huge piece of equipment. Am I right?
Oh, it's massive. The wheels, they kind of spider out to 16 feet wide by, I think it's 20 something feet long, with the wheels all the way out, for stability reasons. And, that was the only lift they could get us. And it was late fall, and we were really pushing our limits with the weather and painting the steeple, and they couldn't get us another 120. And it was a real challenge to get it in close enough to the church, have enough room between power lines and not being in the road and sidewalks. And, but we got it in and got it done. And we ended up finishing the steeple in the nick of time. I mean, the next day, I think we got like 4 inches of snow. So
what was it like in that basket at the very top? Was it bouncy or was it pretty stable?
They definitely rock back and forth and move on you, but you kind of get used to it, and you just kind of move with it, and I've been in a basket for so much of my time that it's like second nature now, but it's funny when I have somebody that's in the basket that's not used to it,
Oh, it's terrifying. I'm going to say it. Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. Anyone who's done remodeling would agree with me when I say, like, it's way easier to work on modern construction, like stuff from the 50s on versus older stuff. Can you talk about some of the complications of working on the houses that you seem to favor?
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely 150% agree with that comment. Anything from the 50s up is like a breeze. And when we get a project on a newer house, we're like, wow, this is just so easy, But, we run into all kinds of stuff. For example, I have a house in Altamont that I've worked on several times for the same customer. And we did a roof on their house, reframed the whole roof in January about 3 years ago.
Because that's when that kind of work seems to happen for whatever reason.
Right. They called us and said, our roof is leaking and can you patch it up? And we got up there and it had Philadelphia gutters built into it.
I don't know what that means.
So a Philadelphia gutter it's a built-in gutter where the roof line comes down and tips back up. So it creates a swale, and then it goes to a downpipe. And
those are always rotted.
Those are always rotten, and they're terrible for New York State. So we put a roof on our house. We reframed it. It didn't have much pitch. It was a hip style roof. So we cut all our rafters in the shop next to the wood stove, and then brought everything down and assembled it. But then last winter, she wanted us to put in a new bathroom for her, and complete demo and all new construction, on the interior. And about a month before we were supposed to start, she sent me a message and said, if I didn't know that I had just paid for a really expensive brand new roof, I would think I needed a roof because the whole wall in my bathroom, exterior wall, is leaking. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, we go through all the proper steps, and we go beyond with, underlayments and things like that. We go higher up the roof than what's recommended always. And no shortcuts taken. So I was kind of dumbfounded, and I messaged her back and I said, well, I'll come over and look at it, and I'll bring some fans and we'll get it dried out. And so we did. And we were going to gut her bathroom anyway. So I said, well, I think that we should, the roof looks good. Everything looks good on the top side. And I said, I think that we should just go ahead
see
and
what's
gut the
going on.
bathroom. Yeah. And so we gutted the bathroom, and the first day we were there, we still couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And the wall was saturated. And the next morning we came in, and she had turned the heat on, and she has steam heat and crawl space under this bathroom. And there's steam coming up through the floor. And we're like, what's going on?
There's your problem.
So that was exactly what the problem was. It had gotten, it was right next to the wall under the floor, and it ran.
So
up
it's just
the wall.
blowing steam into the framing cavity. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't blame her for thinking that it was the roof. I was thinking it might've been the roof. I couldn't figure out where, but so unfortunately, that whole area, we ended up, ripping out the floor system because every floor joist was split. They used to do a lot of old construction used to have like a half lap joint for your floor joist with a pocket to tie it in.
Yeah. And that's like probably early 20th century, right? That's what I remember. Yeah.
Yep. And a lot of the time those floors get overloaded, or, they're old and they split right there. So we put, a really expensive marble shower and marble floor in, and, we had to reframe it. So,
sure.
So it all had to come out, and then we redid all the steam pipes while we were in there. So,
how do you find plumbers to work on steam heating systems as an example? And I'd like to ask you more about subs later on, but this seems like a good question.
We do all that in-house. That's where my brother comes in. And, he takes the reins when it comes to that stuff. I'd be lost without him, So,
and I would let him.
Yeah. And that's where he shines. That's his end of it for us. He really, he just walks in and looks at that, and he's like, all right, well, we're going to replace everything with copper, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And I become, what do you need me to cut? How long do you need it? So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's nice.
What about like some of the other weird stuff you've come across in your work on old houses?
I guess for other people it's weird stuff, but it's kind of common for us. We run into all kinds of things that have been fixed and patched, and like sills on houses. The old timers used to just fill them full of concrete. They'd rot out, and they'd fill them full of concrete. So we run into that a lot.
I think they were trying to air seal is what I gather, right?
Yeah,
They're trying.
Yeah. And, we've ran into, we did another project in Altamont that we ended up timber framing a brand new roof on a 1880s home, colonial style house. And, the homeowner was adamant that he wanted it timber framed. We could have stick framed it with a modern style roof, but he said, I just wouldn't be able to live with myself going up into the attic and looking at 2x10s.
That's pretty cool. That's a very special person.
Absolutely. And very nice people and very committed to their home. And it took them a long time to be ready for us. Like, we first met them, I think, in 2008 when we did that big steeple project. And he told me, he said, that's when I seen what you were doing there, I was absolutely positive that's who I wanted to reframe my roof. So, and I can't take all the credit for that. We have some really skilled timber framers in our area, a couple of them in particular that live just outside the village. And one of them, Brett, he helped us with that. And he did the timber framing aspect of it in his shop. Timber framed all the new rafters and then brought them down, and we assembled them on the ground and set them with a crane. But that was,
were these folks living there at the time?
Yeah, they lived there through the whole project, and I pretty much did too. So, that a lot of people are like, how are you going to take this roof off this entire house? It's, 28 feet wide and 47 or 48 feet long. And, we had to take the whole framework off, put a whole new framework on and get it watertight without getting any water in the house. And, we just, you got to just jump in and do it. And it was actually a really rainy stretch during that time. We couldn't catch a break. So we ended up ripping the entire roof off. And then we did real temporary ridge with poles and some temporary rafters, and we tarped it really good. And we had our lift on site all the time, and we were on call 24/7. And, we kept the water out. We had a couple drips here and there, but nothing ever came through to the plaster, and so
that had to keep you up at night. I can guarantee. Yeah.
Well, whenever we get into projects like that, I don't go far from the village, So,
and you're listening for wind outside, right? When you're lying in bed. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We had one call, he called us one night, and it was raining and windy, and it was starting to drip in around the chimney a little bit. So, it was like 10 o'clock at night. We ran right down there and got up in the lift and got it sealed back up and kept the water out, and we've done that before. We did another one a few years before that where we had like monsoon rain, and it was kind of unexpected. And I ended up spending the night in their attic the whole night because I couldn't leave because we had, it was, the tarps were bellying and I had to be able to push the water off. And so every hour and a half, I had my cell phone set to wake me up. I literally laid on a tarp in their attic, to keep the water out. So,
And people think like contractors have it easy, right? Like, oh, you drive around a truck. Oh, you got a clipboard. Oh, you just tell people it costs thousands of dollars and, have some coffee.
Right. Yep.
You've mentioned several times already, like your fondness for machinery, right? And how it's probably made your work possible, cranes, bucket lifts. What else have you found that has made it easier to be a contractor?
I guess as far as like power tools,
whatever.
Okay. I think the multi-tool, when that came out, especially in a cordless version, that's a lifesaver. The impact gun, we use that all the time. I mean, those two tools have come out, since I've started in this business, and torque screws versus Phillips heads, stuff like that. I mean, those so much easier to deal with and work with, and have made my life. I mean, those are the tools that I go to every single day. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't put my hands on either one of those. So,
do you have a favorite cordless battery platform?
So, me and my brother, we dispute this every day.
That's hilarious.
So he's a big Milwaukee guy, and I'm a DeWalt guy, and so we joke a lot because we both agree that between DeWalt and Milwaukee, there are certain tools that are better in one than the other.
Sure.
And so we joke a lot that they should just get together and call it DeWalkie. So, but I mean, I don't know. I'm probably going to really, when my brother sees this podcast, he's probably really going to bust me, but,
we should have had him on. I wish I'd have known.
I think that, we would lean more towards, probably Milwaukee at this point. I feel like DeWalt is they're not as good as they used to be, in personal experience, but, Milwaukee, I feel, is a better made tool, but some of their tools are more bulky. So,
yeah, I agree with both those sentiments.
Yeah.
I've been pretty stoked about the Makita stuff I've been trying lately.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, because I used it for a long time and then gave it up because they fell behind. But the stuff I've used more recently is pretty sweet. It's a little more refined.
Yep. Yeah, the Milwaukee stuff is definitely bulky, but
it's getting the batteries out of the charger, like, I find painful sometimes. I don't know why it has to be so hard.
So hard. Yep.
So how do you find good clients? You said they come to you mostly. Is that true? And are there any
Yeah.
red flags that will send you run the other way?
I mean, occasionally I get a bad vibe from a customer. You know, over my years of being in business, I've had a few that have, caused me some issues, but very few. I mean, when you look at all the customers I've had in the last 23 years or so, I've only had a handful, not even, of customers who really, didn't turn out to be great. I don't like to leave a project until my customer is completely satisfied and happy. And we don't, we're local, so we don't go anywhere. If they ever have a problem, we're right there.
And similarly, word gets around if you do a crappy job, right? Like if you
Absolutely.
leave something unfinished or done poorly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So, we strive on making our customers happy so that they pass our name along. And typically when you do that, if you find a good customer, they're usually linked to lots of other good people that just want a good job, and so that's worked out really well for us. I mean, the only advertising that we do is our T-shirts. We have Village Carpenter written on our vans, and so that's like a driving billboard. But aside from that, we really we don't advertise we used to put yard signs out, but we kind of stopped because we're so booked.
And people were like preventing you from doing work at certain times, I'm sure too, right? Like people just stopping in to talk to you. That's a problem.
Oh yeah. I mean, we get that a lot. When you work in the village, especially right in the heart of the village, we always see people we know. And even other areas of town, we have another area of town a street in particular that we work on. And it's like, I mean, we know every person on that street just about, and we've worked for probably 3/4 of them. And so, yeah, we get, people driving by and beeping and waving and, and if they're out walking, they'll stop. And so, that slows us down a little, but, it's nice to be in a community like that. A lot of them, they're always asking how we're doing, how my kids are doing. And so it's kind of nice.
That's nice. I think you'd agree that like subcontractors can make or break your business as a general contractor. How do you find good ones? And I've heard many are short staffed. Have you found that to be true too?
Yeah, we only use a handful of subs. We use the same ones religiously. I don't play the game of shopping around and, trying to find a cheaper price or, most of my subs are fair to me and I try to be fair to them. And, we also find them from word of mouth. And, if there's a job where, there's lots of jobs where I'd like to sub things out, like roofing in particular. As I get older, it gets harder to do that. But I don't have a good sub for that, so we won't sub it out. And I hope to find one, but yeah, I mean,
you need a chiropractic subcontractor, right?
Yeah. So we, it's 100% word of mouth as far as finding subs.
Do your guys have trouble finding help?
Yeah, I mean, I know I have a guy that does a lot of our excavation and concrete work. He has a really good base crew. So I know he always has a couple helpers that come and go. Mm-hmm. But he has his son and one other employee that's been there for a long, long time. And, so they do pretty good. I know the guy that does my sheetrocking and taping, he goes through a lot of guys.
That's hard work.
Help. Yeah, it's really hard work. I don't know how he does it. I honestly don't.
And the thing is, once you train someone, they can go anywhere, right? And do it. It's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to keep people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You mentioned you come from a handy family. So did you start doing building and handy things at a young age?
Yeah, I was definitely, I had my own little wood shop in my basement in my parents' house when I was probably around 11 or 12. I started to really get into it. And we used to have a place called the Tool Shed in Schenectady, New York, that we used to go to. I used to go with my dad a lot, who sold used tools. And, they were a bunch of firemen that did this as a side job. And so they were really good guys, and they were open only a couple days a week. And we would go down there, I think, on Tuesday nights, and we'd just hang out for the whole evening.
Yeah, it sounds like a social experience as much as a learning about tools experience.
Absolutely. But those guys were really good to me when I was young. They'd give me stuff or give it to me cheap. And so I ended up, by the time I was 16, I pretty much had a halfway decent wood shop. And, I was starting to venture out and do repairs for people and small jobs. And I ended up, working at our local hardware store for a while. Then I ended up working for 2 contractors before I really went out on my own. But those were both fairly short-term jobs that I did. And I've pretty much been on my own ever since.
Not everyone likes ending up in construction. Like, some people seem to love the craft of it. Some people do it as a necessity, or they were just naturally gifted at it. Some people take satisfaction some days and find it agony others, which I think probably describes most people. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I think I definitely there's days when I come home and I'm beat, and especially when we're doing roofing and things that are just hard on your body, and those days I'm just, exhausted and every once in a while I'll have a real rough day and I'll be like, why do I do this? But then the gratifying end of it is, taking an old home and doing a restoration on parts of it and keeping it alive and keeping it going and not just hacking it back together with modern trim. And, we recreate our own trim when we need to. We do all that type of stuff. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. That's the part that's, the part I like the most is the finish end of it, But,
what do you think people misunderstand about trade work?
Well, I think cost, especially nowadays, I do definitely.
They think you're getting rich, right?
Yeah. I think they're a little sticker shocked, especially in the last year or so with the prices of everything. And, for the most part, most of my customers are understanding, but, some of them, I think they think that, it's a lot of money to remodel a kitchen or a bathroom. It's not, it's not a $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 job anymore. It's
tens of thousands minimum, right?
Tens of thousands. Yeah. And depending on how in depth you go, you spend 80,000 on a kitchen, 100,000 on a kitchen or more. And, but I think sometimes they just don't realize what goes into it,
I'm sure they don't.
The amount of work and time and effort and wear and tear on yourself and all your overhead, that's way beyond just showing up to the job every day. So,
oh yeah. Yeah. And you don't make any money on that stuff, right? It's
right. And and it never leaves my head. Everything goes with me. I just can't shut it off. So, I'm at night, I'm thinking about, all right, what are we going to do with this tomorrow? Or how are we going to deal with this issue? Or, my mind just doesn't stop spinning,
What do you check out when you go to commercial spaces or restaurants, as an example? Are you checking out the woodwork and the tile work? Probably everything is my guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I try not to even look when you're in a commercial space because usually
it's terrible.
It's terrible. So, it's funny when you say that though, because, one of the things I enjoy doing is traveling, and we have some antique cars, and we like to drive those all over the country, or not the country, but all over the countryside. Mm-hmm. And we go from a lot of different towns, a lot of rural towns, And the first thing I look for is a steeple. So, we'll cruise into town and I'll be like, oh, we got to look at that steeple over there. We'll go check it out. So, when I walk into a customer's home, I'm definitely looking, at what's already been done.
The quality of work, right? Yeah. You want to know who they've hired in the past.
Yeah. Yep. And, if it's a hack job or if it's actually halfway decent, this job we're just finishing up now. They had a porch that they enclosed into a sunroom, and the guy that did it, he did a really nice job. About 20 years ago, kept the porch post so it still retained that look from the outside. And he made these raised panels to go between the floor and the bottom of the windows. And again, really nice job, but they're rotting in certain areas. And when we went to pull it apart, he used some kind of a plywood to build this all. And we're like, why would he do that? And I mean, because he really did a nice quality job in assembling this whole thing. And when we went to take one of those raised panels apart, we realized, my brother is the one who took it apart. And he came to me and he says, well, I think I know why he used plywood. And I said, why is that? He said, because he wasn't really a carpenter for exterior renovation. He was a cabinet maker, because this whole thing was built, you can tell, in a shop. Yeah. And everything was screwed in from the backside, and then the whole panel was put in as one piece. And he's like, he probably just tried to use some kind of, exterior grade plywood. And
he probably didn't have the water management right too, right? Like it's something you learn tearing apart old houses, I think, is what you'd agree with that. Like,
Yep. Well, there's no gutter on the porch, and there's a brick ledge where the old, that was the floor of the porch. So you have water dripping off, hitting the brick ledge, and then splashing onto these raised panels and, causing all kinds of havoc. So
one of my early carpenter friends said that carpenters stay in business with porches and decks. It's like what you do.
Absolutely. Yep. The neighbor to this house, we went there to basically paint the entire house and do some restoration work on their carriage house while we were there, and, do some new skirting on the front porch. They have a 30-foot by 10-foot front porch, beautiful home.
Nice.
And we got there, and I'm looking at this, and we pulled the skirting off, and I'm like, oh, this is a nightmare. And we realized that the whole porch had dropped roughly between 2 and 3 inches.
Because it's sitting on dirt, right?
Yeah, well, 15 years ago, this guy told me that he had hired a contractor to come in and fix the footings. And after pulling the skirting off, all I could see was some 4x4s that they had dug down about 1.5 feet and propped in there. And the posts that were there before that were still not original. They were steel. And so they were rotting. And this other guy came in and he dug down, probably with a small shovel as deep as he could. And he just put a little block or a little stone in the bottom, and he just propped it with a pressure treated 4x4. And the columns that are sitting on this are 20 inches round at the base. So it's just, you take the skirt off and it looks like it looks like a toothpick, and,
will that 4x4 punch up in the center of that wood column? Yeah, is that how that works?
Yeah. The hollow column, by the way. And, all the floor joists were curling and pushing downward. And, I will say that, a lot of people, there's kind of a myth out there that all these old homes are so well built. I will tell you that in my experience, I have found that not to be the case. Some are, but a lot of them, especially porches, especially in Altamont, a lot of them it's unreal to me how far apart they'd space roof rafters and floor joists and, things like that. And this one was another one. They were like 2.5 feet apart. They were 2x6s spanning 12 feet. You walk across the floor and it bounces, so, we ended up jacking that up and reframing the entire thing, all out of pressure treated. We put in all new footings, new posts, and, all new skirting. It's basically Cadillac, it's beyond what it was when it was new. And
how do you have that conversation with that client? Like,
yeah,
you need to see this. This is way worse than we could have thought. How do you do that?
Right. So that's a hard part of my job. One of the things I hate the most about my job is having to have that conversation and having to go to the customer and be like, I know we're here to do this, this, and this, but, we just took the skirting off and here we have, a whole nest of mess. And, I usually try to be pretty blunt and straightforward with them and just be like, listen, this is what's going on. What do you want to do? Because we can continue with the house. We can paint the house. We can redo the carriage house. We can take care of all those things, but I'm not comfortable putting skirting back on this porch. And, most of my customers, they're used to being in an old home. They're used to, unfortunately, finding
writing
surprises.
checks.
Yeah. And he came and he said to me, he said, well, what would you do if it was your house? He goes, would you paint the house or do this? And I said, well, this is structural. So to me, you got to fix the structural stuff before you fix the cosmetics. The house, the paint's not so bad that it's destroying the siding. And, we really should focus on this. And he's like, well, I'd really like to have you do that and then paint the house. And I said, well, us too, but our schedule is not going to allow both. So, what we ended up doing was trading off our time frame, our time slot for him became redoing that porch. And now next year we'll go back and we'll paint the house and redo the carriage house.
It's heartening when people make wise choices about their homes. I don't think they always do, but it seems like your customers get it mostly.
For the most part, yep.
Speaking of writing checks, I've seen photos of your house, which is quite the place. Can you describe it to folks for me?
Yeah. So our house was built in 1772. We moved from an 1890s very small farmhouse to this big brick home.
It's big. How big is it?
It's just under 5,000 square feet. Which, with having 4 kids, we were like, we need a bigger house. And, we had no intentions of buying an old home because that's what I do all day is work on old homes. And I said to my wife, and we had our old farmhouse and we work on that all the time. And I said to my wife, I said, until the kids are older, I kind of want to move into a more modern home that has a lot less work for me to do. And, so we were looking and looking and looking, and just every deal that we came to fell through or went down the tubes for whatever reason. And this place is only a mile from our old home, and it used to be a restaurant. And we actually used to come here. It was reservations only. They were only open for dinner. We used to come maybe once or twice a year. And,
it was the nice place to come in town is what I gathered.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually proposed to my wife here.
Nice.
So we had a connection to this place, and they closed in 2014, and just because they wanted to retire, and they built a brand new replica of this house. And I always said to myself, I'm like, why are they building a brand new house? It's almost
you mean the former owners built a house exactly like this one?
Yeah. A half a mile from this one.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The footprint is the same. This house is all brick and stone. Their new house, is timber frame. So it's a little different. But more or less it's the same house. And I was like, why would they want to do that? And, I never really asked them, but, I kind of figured it out on my own after I bought this one. So, so they bought this house, and it was a wreck in the 70s. And, it was known as the dump on the hill, in town. And they completely restored this house, by themselves, more or less.
Like period correct, like single glazed windows and that's all that stuff.
Most of it still has single glazed windows. There's 54 windows in this house. and I would say 30 of them are still original. There are some replacements, like the ones behind me are actually new windows or newer windows. But they restored it but they modified it into a restaurant. So it had commercial kitchen, commercial bathrooms, sprinkler system in part of it. But they kept the integrity of the original house, and they kept the charm and that part of it. The room I'm sitting in was used as a dining room. They didn't rip walls down. There's a formal living room, formal dining room upstairs. There's another room that we've converted into a master bedroom. That was all dining areas plus this room. And, that they all kept, and then they added on in the back of the house, and that's where they put the commercial kitchen. And
so did you lop that kitchen off, or is that still part of the structure?
So that's still there. When we took over the house, the kitchen was emptied. All the appliances were gone, but the shell was there. Everything was still more or less set up for a restaurant. And we went through it room by room. That back section, unfortunately, needed a lot more work than I anticipated. Exterior walls, about 40 feet of wall, 2 walls, had to be completely removed and restudded. And they were rotted. They had blacktop in the back that had been blacktop several times over the years, and they brought the elevation too high. Yeah. So it was just allowing water in, typical old house problems. But the bones of the original structure are absolutely solid on this house, and that's what sold me. We came here because we were being nosy. We really wanted to just walk through it one more time, and I'd never seen the entire house. So I had messaged my wife one day, and I said we should go look at the Tory Tavern, and she's like, absolutely not. We're not buying that house. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to buy it either, but I do want to walk through it. So, we walked through the house, and my wife, who is not necessarily really into old homes, just completely fell in love with it again. We hadn't been in it in several years. And she's like, I really think, she whispered to me that she's like, I think we should put in an offer. And I said, I think you're crazy. And so, the next day, she convinced me that it was a good idea. And, we talked to the realtor that was selling the house, and she said, you probably should write a letter to the owners with your offer and explain to them who you are and what you want to do and what you're,
because they love this house, right? They love this building.
They put their blood, sweat, and tears into this place. And, and so we did that. We wrote them a 2-page letter and told them we wanted to turn it back into a home for us and our family. And, we sent them an offer that was much lower than what they were asking, expecting a counter, and expecting them to just be like, no way, and I don't know, I think it was 6 hours later, they responded back and accepted our offer. And so that made it affordable, or so I thought at the time, to buy the house and renovate it. And, so we're going on to, I don't know, almost 4 years into this. And, we're 95% through the interior. The exterior doesn't need a lot. We did some exterior work when we first got it. That back section, which was the newest part of the house, which actually needed the most work.
Additions are always crappy, or often are crappy. Yeah. I think you'd agree, right? Yeah,
yep, absolutely. And, the style of it is fine, but the construction of it was not the best. And, so we had to do a lot of rehab back there. So, during COVID, we were shut down for 10 weeks, and, my brother's like, what are we going to do? And I said,
you got a lot done on your house, I bet.
Yes. He came here every day for 10 weeks straight, and we did the whole exterior of the back of the house. But the rest of the main house, the original part, it's all brick. The previous owners to us had the entire thing repointed, and they've maintained it over the years. And, there's a lot of trim work and stuff that needs to be painted, but none of it is rotten. So
that's awesome.
we're super fortunate.
How thick is the masonry? Because I'm looking at the wall behind you. It looks like it's, I don't know, what, 16 inches thick?
Yeah, the stone is actually thicker. It's probably close to 18 to 20 inches thick, because you've got the thickness of the window, plus there's another 3-4 inches outside the window. And then it kind of tapers up to the main floor of the house, which is brick. There's 2 stories of brick above us, and those are 4 courses thick. So, and I know that because I did a little bit of a sin, and I cut another opening into the back wall of the house. And, it took me and my nephew an entire day to cut a 36-inch opening. I mean, it was just, we're in there with a demo saw and, a cloud of clay dust, and, it was.
How do you support the masonry while you do that?
So it was only a 3-foot opening, and I was like, geez, what should I do? And, I ended up cutting out on both sides like a course of the brick, and I put a piece of steel angle iron in there. And then I went from there down to the floor on an angle with some 2x6s with a notch cut in them and a brace against that. And we just supported the 2 outer layers while we ripped it all out. And then we put in a steel header. And the reason I used steel was to keep it small, so that when I put my door trim on, I could still hide it. I can hide it all, and we're restoring this house, but we're also, we have 4 kids. We're kind of, as much as I am a purist, there's certain aspects of making this house into a more modern living,
a more livable place, right? People don't live like they did in, when that house was built. Yeah,
exactly. So that is the reason why we cut that opening, was to gain access to another part of the addition that was on the back of the house, to gain from our master bedroom. So,
when I was a carpenter, it was really unappealing to want to work on my own projects on the weekends. How do you feel about working on your house, which I'm sure there's always something to do?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's still a mountain of stuff to do. So, it's funny because on our old house, I really got burned out, and, I'm really into the antique cars, and that's my hobby.
And that's what you want to do on the weekends, right?
Right, exactly. That's what I like to do when I'm home on the weekends, is play with those and work on those. And so I just put it in my head that when we bought this house, that for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, that's my hobby. And that's what I need to focus on. And, I've stayed pretty true to that up until about this year. I've gotten the house to a point where, we're in really good shape on the interior. And the exterior is not far behind, really. And, so I finally allowed myself to kind of get back into the cars, and the cars literally didn't see daylight for 3 years. So, I mean, I didn't even start them. I just kept them in the back of the barn and just didn't even look at them. I didn't, I just focused on this house. And so I was getting to a point where I was starting to get burned out, and I was like, all right, I'm going to start messing with the cars a little bit, so I've been getting back into those, and I'm still trying to designate at least a day or a half a day a week on the house. And, and we're still moving forward. So
that's cool. I think you're wise to get a break from it, for a period, because
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You want to like it, right? You don't want to hate doing it.
It is a love-hate relationship, you know what I mean?
Totally.
For me. And, there's days, and, this house has fought me in some of the projects that we've done here. And, for example, we restored a lot of the original part of the house first. And, the top floor, the 3rd floor has 4 bedrooms and a bathroom, and it had been done in the late 70s. So I just went in and refreshened it up. I didn't run all new plumbing from the basement all the way up to the top. It was copper. So I thought, well, it's copper. It's in decent shape. It looks good from what I can see. You know, let's not get crazy on this bathroom. We got a whole house to pay for. So we did a light remodel, got that done, dining room, living room underneath it done, master bedroom done, hallway done, the tavern, the room that we're in now, this is the tavern, was pretty much done. And I got a frantic phone call from my mom one day who was getting the kids off the bus, and she came in the tavern door and there was water running out of the ceiling. And I'm like, I was at our old house at the time. So it, I was only a mile down the road. So I came home real quick, water pouring out of the ceiling. And, I'm like, great. So I go upstairs to the first floor and it's coming down the stairs. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I go all the way up to the top, and a pipe had, it was a copper sweat fitting that had been sweated on, but whoever did it, it only caught by like a 1/16 of an inch. I don't know if you've ever sweated copper pipes, but
I have.
A lot of the time you sweat a pipe, and when things heat up, they tend to come apart from each other, especially if there's any strain on it. And you have
or if you're doing a like collection of fittings, they'll actually push each other apart as the gas expands in them, right?
Exactly. And and so that had to have been what happened. And whoever was soldering it didn't catch that. Well, it held for 30 years. And
waited until you redid the entire house.
Oh, yeah. And the part of the house I hadn't touched yet is the part that did not flood. So, of course. So that was a real big setback.
Can I ask you a really practical question about that? So is it your
Sure.
homeowner's insurance that covers that? I'm guessing it is. It's not your builder policy. It's not your...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So it was our homeowners, which was a huge fight. They won out over us. And part of that, it's funny because part of what you said about working on new homes ties into this, because they come out and they look at it and they're giving me square footage prices for sheetrock, square footage prices for flooring, square or lineal foot prices for trim work, and it just doesn't compare to what it actually costs. And so that whole project to fix everything that was damaged by water was over $80,000, and that's with me doing some of the work. And I think we ended up with $50,000 from the insurance. So
that's tragic, man.
Yeah, it was, but you got to just keep rolling. My number one thing was we have the original hard pine floors in our house, wide plank, and I called a company to come out and like a quick response place
to dry them out,
to dry everything out, and they got here and they're like, well, we're only supposed to cut the bare minimum. I'm like, I don't care what you have to do. The only thing I care about in this house right now are these floors.
Yeah.
I'm like, they are the original floors. They're the only thing that I really can't reproduce.
Yeah.
All the trim in this house is painted. So even if I have to replace trim, I can reproduce it. And I'm like,
you're not going to get 14-inch pine boards.
Right. Exactly. With that color. And as it turned out, the only floor that we couldn't salvage for multiple reasons, but that was the icing on the cake, was the water damage, was our dining room floor, which was directly below this bathroom. That one we had to replace. And so I had a mill custom make it, and we got it, and it was so well made. I had to kind of beat it up a little bit to try to blend it.
It didn't look like it belonged in the house, right?
No, I mean, the joints were so tight when they were together, you almost couldn't see them. And so I gapped them a little bit on purpose. I made a punch because I screwed the new floor down because they're face nailed. I did not use square cut nails to put them down, but I basically made a square cut head on the end of a punch. And after I set the screws, I went through and punched a square hole into the wood. And then we used a black wood filler, which is like the rest of the house. And, so we did stuff to try to, it's not the same, but it's close. So,
I'm guessing you don't have, an unlimited budget for that kind of stuff. So, we do what we can, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and we're way over budget, way over budget. So I feel, and it's funny in owning this house, I definitely feel more of my customers' pain,
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to that, because, it's just, you're just constantly bleeding money, when you own a place like this. So,
I'm glad it's in your hands because it takes someone who's cares about the house like that, right? It'd be really easy to ruin it with cheap stuff and bad work,
Yep. We were missing several doors in this house. I don't know where they went, but they're gone when we bought the place. And I really wanted to put doors on every door frame that was in here. And we went to several salvage places and spent anywhere between $100 and $200 a door. And then my dad and one of my best friends, they're both in their 70s. They sat here in what's now the kitchen. Every Friday we work on this house typically, especially during the wintertime. And they sat here in that kitchen all day with a heat gun and a putty knife, scraping and taking 6, 7, 8 layers off. And then you got to find the hardware.
I would treat my family better if I were you.
Yeah. They are definitely good to me. So.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Charlie.
Yeah, you as well.
Anything you want to ask or tell our listeners before we go?
No, I mean, I'm good.
It's been really nice talking to you, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Charlie Stewart for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Charlie, thanks a million.
Yeah, thank you.